Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And we're going to talk with ourselves today, ironically, because we like to make an impact. And boy, we've had some big problems. Camden, you think of the big problem that you're dealing with right now, and maybe it's sitting on the couch behind you?
Yeah, I got one big problem and one smaller problem. If you guys are on YouTube, you see the wide angle, which by the way, you got to be on YouTube. We're coming up on 500 subscribers. Got to get on YouTube. But you can see Loogie and Gumbo in there. So as far as big problems go, hopefully no barking, so we can solve that problem, keep it nice and cool for the next 45 minutes, right?
That's right. And nice and cool in Tucson that's a bit of a stretch though. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
that was a poor choice of phrase, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, as our buddy Angus says, that's a stretch goal, Camden. Nice and cool in Tucson is definitely a stretch goal.
Oh
So
yeah.
hey, but we've talked about our businesses. We've talked about Tribe and Purpose on the show, and we've kind of danced around some of the other ventures that we've both been involved with over the years, and as entrepreneurs. And we thought we'd just take some time in this show and maybe share a little bit more about those journeys. And Camden, you had that great. I mean, man, it was truly gonna solve a big problem. Uh, that just never seemed. Actually, both of your businesses were solving some huge problems,
I say
but
all
they never
three, but
got it.
those first three.
Yeah, first three. They never quite got out the door. And so I wanted to start with your most recent one, which is Vir-Bee. And you know, sometimes I think folks don't aren't open to ideas, and even their own ideas is really what I'm getting at. So let's talk. Let's start off with ideation of Vir-Bee and where how that generated.
Yeah, so I mean, quite simply, like I would guess this happened to a lot of other entrepreneurs, but also that's kind of that self projection that we tend to do. But as the pandemic has really taken hold and we got stuck at home, I couldn't coach rugby or anything anymore. Obviously, turn your energy straight into your business. Work beats worry, right? And the business that I had just before the pandemic had started, I was going door to door. We talked about it before. Opportunities Food Waste Solutions, doing bokashi systems and processing food waste into fertilizer. Well, I was going door to door trying to get that food waste. So the pandemic really killed that door to door aspect of it. Restaurants didn't want to talk to me. None of those things were happening. And so I really just thought, look, I've got this money, not much money, but I had this money from that business. I was like, how can I leverage this into another project? And I really just started thinking, what is the problem that people are having with this? Not just, the first thing that came up with this was a piece of Vir-Bee was the connection aspect, being around each other, sense of community, all those kind of things. That was a big piece of it. But I work with the Engage Foundation nonprofit here in Tucson. My wife has worked with a few different nonprofits here in Tucson. And one of the things that came to mind right away was the galas, the fundraising, and all those type of events that you can't do. And for a business to not be able to have a networking event, is it going to hurt your business? Yeah, it is. There's other things in the pandemic that were hurting them worse, but the thing that was crushing nonprofits was the lack of the fundraising aspect, because the fundraising is where they get the salaries for everyone in their inside their organization, so they can go make that awesome impact. And so I was thinking about that, and I just thought okay, well, what can we do to simulate that? And admittedly, I immediately went to like the not artificial intelligence, the augmented reality. Sorry, wrong acronym. Augmented reality and those type of things. Obviously, that was a little bit far off. That was part of the goals there, the stretch goal, like you said. But really just came down to, it's like, okay, well, what's the minimum viable product that we can put together? And it was, you get people together, and then what is the thing that we all bond about? Really, when you go hang out with somebody, what's the thing that's the best? It's having that beer together, sharing a slice of pizza, going to get a burger with somebody. All those little things are really what we were missing a lot of during the pandemic. And so Vir-Bee was designed to fill that gap, to have these networking, or not networking events, these fundraising events where you could come together and you could break bread, you could have a beer, and you could do it all virtually. And it was cool because to me, it was just integration, which is such a simple thing of just tying these different things that already existed, DoorDash, Domino's, whatever, love to get the food to people, finding businesses that could ship liquor to people. Most states we could send them a bottle of whiskey and all those kind of things. But it really just started off with that, okay, what is the problem? And then how can I solve it from there? And I think really when you're talking about the ideation, that's where you should start with anything. Because even if it's an amazing idea, if you're not solving a problem for somebody, I'm not really sure what's the purpose, right? Like, it's a cool idea, but if it's just cool, you're not going to get people in the door. And when you solve a problem, that's when people are really going to come to you. So I think that's the key there.
Yeah. And I think that's a great lesson that a lot of people tend to skip, because you instantly have this pride of ownership of this really cool idea that you have that is, all right, this is the best thing since sliced bread. That's what I think it is. And you try to go to market without doing a little bit more research. And I think that that was part of I think it was one of the pieces for Vir-Bee that eventually brought it down, was the true go to market. It was a great idea that was discussed, in the house, and you have a very supportive wife, God bless her. And she's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And your partner in it said, yeah, that's a great idea. But boy, until you really start to get out and test, because mom supported it too, until you get outside the family, the people that think you're, that pinch you on the cheek and think you're cute, and really start to have that. And how do you test that? I think that's a huge piece of every business. And just before we started recording, I was talking with a friend of mine about businesses. Jimmy has a business called Ranch Sense, and we were talking about business structure, and one of those, and in that same sense, that not only are you creating and testing your idea, man, you better be structuring it right too. Because we had Michael on last week, right? And that was one of his big things is, hey, you can spend $1,000 now and get it set up right, or you can spend $30,000-$40,000 in 5 years to fix it. Because that $1,000 hurts when you're in startup mode. But boy, if you don't put it together right in the get-go, it's going to come back and be extremely painful down the road.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's, you got to, we joke all the time about like the baby, your business is your baby, and what it's like to have an ugly baby, or to have somebody call your baby ugly. Ugly baby is if it's actually a bad idea. I guess somebody could call your baby ugly and it's not actually a bad idea. But what you're talking about is like, you got to show the baby off. You got to get that input from other people to see what they really think of it. I think the interesting thing looking back on Vir-Bee is I did something, and actually so you pointed to a mistake, and I think you're right, but I actually tied that with the other mistake I think I made so much with it, which was I tried to solve all of the problems instead of solving one specific problem. I think if I had just stayed in fundraisers, rugby fundraisers, especially getting even more narrow on it, it could have done better, because I fell into the entrepreneur trap of, I saw all the things it could do, and so I told everybody all the things it could do. And you know what the reaction is when you tell somebody every possible thing you could do for them? They go, oh, that's cool. And that's the reaction I got from everybody. And they didn't buy because it wasn't the right thing for their problem. And I think that's an interesting piece there of recognizing that you could have this wide application, but then also intentionally narrowing it back down to a niche to get you started there. But the way that you do that, to your point, is you got to have those conversations with people. You got to get out there. And I think the interesting thing is this is one of those areas of business, and we come into this a lot on the show, where you want to like crack the formula, but I'm not sure if you necessarily can. Preston Brown, when we had him on, Preston made a comment about how do you build a big efficient business? You don't. You build a big inefficient business and you make it efficient later on. And I think that when it comes to ideation, there's a lot of things like that. Like a lot of these traps that like you can try to outsmart the trap, but I'm not sure if you necessarily can. You almost have to go out there and get hit by it so you can make those adjustments. And I want to throw that back over to you of, do you think that, when we talk about the ugly baby and, having that hit you in the face, realizing that you're in the wrong market, all of those kind of things, do you think it's a fair idea to try to outsmart those? Or do you think it's almost one where you got to get to market, get hit in the face and adjust?
If you're trying to outsmart it, you fail. It is one of those tried and true things about business that has absolutely nothing to do with technology. Mm-hmm. You got to know who your customer is, and that does not mean you can't sell to other people that aren't in your niche. But if you don't speak to your customer, nobody hears you. They all think it's a cool idea. That's huge. And it's hard to do because you know that this thing I've got, this leadership thing that we've got, Greenberry Leadership Program, anybody can use that and it'll be great for them. And if I keep saying anybody, then I'm using the great philosophy and great technique of failure, the spray and pray technique. So I'm going to go out with my shotgun and I'm just going to shoot it up into the air at that flock of geese or that flock of ducks, and I ain't going to hit nothing. I'm going to put pellets in one or two of them that never hit them right unless I just get lucky, which happens. And that's why I use that analogy so often, because it does happen. But until I take my shotgun and I put the BB on the end of that barrel out in front of that duck that's flying X speed, so I'm leading it at the right speed and I'm tracking and flowing with it, that one duck in the flock, then I'm going to hit that one duck. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather come home with one duck than no ducks. I'd much rather come home with one client that loves what I'm doing and becomes a raving fan of what I'm doing than this. It works for everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody should be doing this. Well, yeah. And you know what? Those people will come, but you got to sell it to number one first. I don't care whether you're, I said this is a timeless thing. You think about a general store in a small town. Mm-hmm. Who are they trying to sell to? They're trying to sell to the people that they're right there in that small town and focused on them. They're not trying to stock things for, somebody that's driving from LA to Las Vegas to stop in, because that's random. They're selling to the people right there that live there.
And how do you find the best restaurant somewhere? You ask the locals, right?
You ask the locals.
You got to start
doing that all over the world. I do that all over the world. And then when I get told which restaurant to go to, I always grab the senior waiter, find the senior wait staff, have them help me serve my table, and I ask them what the special is. What's this? And if they don't have a special, then I ask them what's their favorite dish, or what does the chef love to cook? Ooh. And I've never gone wrong, no matter where I am in the world, with those techniques.
I'm going to have to ask Pablo what he likes to cook best next time I go to Wild Garlic, because that is a great way to go about it. Oh my gosh, can't believe I hadn't thought of that. I think there's an interesting thing, to play with your analogy a little bit there, talking about, the shotgun hunting ducks. When we talk about outsmarting a problem, it's really funny because when you try to outsmart a problem, you can understand it to every facet, and it doesn't mean you can actually solve it. It doesn't mean that you can account for all of those variables. And I think there's a really interesting example of that. As we're talking, I think back to my Vir-Bee days. If you read my business plan, which I know you did, or at least you said you did, but if you read the business plan, when I talked about my marketing strategies, I used all of the logic of these niches. I just used them all at once. You talking about the shot inside of the shell, right? That's going out of the ducks. I tried to design, I took all that shot out and I wrote a name on each one. I'm going to hit duck 1 and duck 2 and duck 3. And then I shot it up assuming that it would all go exactly where it needed to. And of course it didn't. And I think that's a really interesting example of why you shouldn't necessarily try to outsmart every problem. When you're really facing it, you can fix the problem. But I think when we're talking about outsmarting the problem, it's especially troublesome when you're doing it forecasting. I think is where people run into the most issue with it, because you're trying to anticipate all of these variables that you don't fully understand yet. And while we're talking about outsmarting, we got to get back to rugby. Of course, we're going to talk about rugby. But my favorite example of this, we talked about it before, of coaching with the U of A this past year. We were talking like mall defense. And without getting too technical so we don't lose all the non-rugby people, there's a lot of complexity that goes into rugby, but at the end of the day, you're basically just hitting the guy with the ball. And, there's all these little things that can be so complicated and take so much nuance when it comes to coaching and playing the game. But when it really comes down to it, sometimes you just got to hit that son of a bitch in front of you. And I had this conversation with the boys this year of, it's like, look, you're really smart. I only need one person to outsmart. I need the other 7 of you to just hit somebody. And when you start looking at it that way, you start putting in the brute force aspect of it, you're going to get a little bit of a better result. You should spend some time being smart. It's not all about brute force. Just like the game of rugby is not all about brute force. But you can't forget about the brute force. You talk about outsmarting a problem. You can't outsmart a problem and then never take action, right? You can't outsmart a problem and then never put in the work to find the real solution there, right?
Yeah. Well, man, a couple of things I was thinking of. You know why it's better to hunt with a shotgun, hunt ducks with a shotgun than it is with a 22? Because, right? I mean, if I'm technically aiming at a single target, I'm going to aim and I should just be able to do it with one bullet, right? Mm-hmm. But a shotgun, when you put in the number 12 shot, it's got 100 and some odd BBs in it. But I'm still aiming those BBs at one target. So you think about that niche. What am I doing? Well, I'm going to hit them with emails. I'm going to hit them with social media posts. I'm going to go to networking events and talk to them. I'm going to ask for people to introduce me to them. I'm going to talk to the people I already know in that niche and get more out of it. It's a shotgun approach, but it's a focused shotgun approach. Mm-hmm. That's a part of that metaphor analogy I hadn't even thought of until just now. And the other piece, when you talk about rugby and malls, we got to talk about Scotty Barrett just blowing out the scrum half for Australia on Saturday.
Did he outsmart or did he brute force? He brute force.
That was definitely brute force. That was folks. Hit pause and just search for that Scott Barrett, Australian scrum half. Search for that on YouTube, and it is one of the best reactionary reactionary reactions that I've ever seen in the game of rugby. But here's your business lesson from that. Mm-hmm. He saw the opportunity and he took it, and he took it with everything. He risked a lot because there was a question of whether or not he was offsides, which is cheating, right? Mm-hmm. So he risked a lot. He took the risk on, and I doubt he calculated it. I think he just saw the ball and went for the ball. He saw the opportunity and went all into the opportunity, and it paid off. Yeah. Now, you go back and you look at, well, what all has Scotty Barrett done for the last, 26, 27? What's he done for the last 20 years is prepared for that moment. Mm-hmm. It didn't just happen. It's not an overnight success. So, the point of that, the lesson to that is if you see that one small glimpse of opportunity, man, hit it with everything and go for it. Go all in. Yeah. This ain't a roulette table. I mean, you're seeing that opportunity. You go all in. You know that the dealer's they're out of kings, and you've already got 20 sitting in your hand. So you know that you're going to get 21. You're going to go all in. That's what we're talking about in that split-second moment of opportunity.
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Evergood Adventure Wines. Our loyal listeners know Evergood's founder, Matthew Hexter, from his appearances on the show that never disappointed, and Evergood Adventure Wines doesn't disappoint either. Evergood is a craft winery from Colorado that makes wine from lemons, not grapes. Picture adult lemonades, perfect for your next backyard barbecue or hanging out with friends at the beach or the pool. No need to drink a warm red grape wine when it's 100 degrees out, or hotter here in Tucson. Evergood over ice is the perfect refreshment for a hot summer day. They come in a variety of flavors, including lemon, strawberry, lime, grapefruit, and watermelon. These non-carbonated wines check all the boxes. Gluten-free, vegan, low sugar, and low in sulfites. Best of all, they taste damn good and they have fun names. Like their OG lemon wine called Ski-Rpee. Yep, you heard that one right. And I'll tell you, Ski-Rpee is one of my favorites. Evergood ships to 41 states, so you can order your lemon wines online at evergoodadventurewines.com. Plus, Matthew is offering 20% off for our listeners. Just use promo code CAM-OTIS at checkout to get 20% off and start enjoying these amazing lemon wines. Go to evergoodadventurewines.com and click Buy Now to redeem your Cam and Otis Show exclusive. I think I just wanted to add there, when you talk about when you talk about that, the thing that comes to mind for the play and then also the business aspect of it is the anticipation. And you're anticipating and you're seeing that spot and you're saying, okay, here's the spot where I can make that impact. It's not necessarily guaranteed, but you have to put the effort in to see if it's ever going to actually come to that. Ideation, I think, is a little bit different, but taking action with the business definitely is not. So if we're going back, the different phases there, that first phase, ideation, I think the thing I would add there, as we're kind of putting a bow on it, is that you should be stretching those muscles and playing with those ideas as much as you can. Once you get a really good one that passes, that family and friends test that we were talking about a little bit earlier, that's where you start to put the brute force to go all in on it, because then you can see what's really happening. I use this example all the time. I need to come up with a better one, but or a different one at the very least. But I always talk about this, with Norman, our old producer and my co-founder with Vir-Bee, that one of the things that I loved about working with him was he would come in with these weird problems all the time, and it just let me stretch my problem-solving muscles. My ideation muscles. I always use the example if he came in and said, Camden, what are we going to do about all this space debris? I went, shit, Norman, I don't know, but we got to do something. And we spent about 30 minutes coming up with a business plan of, going up there, designing the rockets and going up there and solving the space debris problem. I think we settled on lasers, if I remember right. But the point
lasers
is...
Lasers are the answer to everything.
They kind of are. But no, you go through and you get to that point, and then it's like, okay, well, can I go build a rocket and a laser right now? Well, no. All right. Well, that was fun. That's a good exercise. That's something good to put, you always say the back of the notebook type solutions. Something good to have and to think about, but it's not actionable. I think that next step is discovering the actionability of it. And then once you do that, then you brute force it. Then you go all in and see what you get out of it. Because if you always half-ass it, you're never going to really get an answer. I don't have a specific example with any of my businesses because fortunately I dove in on them. But, that's a problem that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have is it's like, I'm running Vir-Bee. Let's say I never dove all in on Vir-Bee. I could still be running Vir-Bee right now. One event every 3 months, barely breaking even, not doing anything. And it could run. It could be a back burner thing. But if you never dive all the way in, then you're never going to reach your full potential of it. And what I want to throw over to you is then, what do you think is, or again, there's probably not an answer to it, but it's more so what are the decision criteria for when you should apply that brute force, when you should dive all into that idea?
Well, the first time you do it, your probability of success is going to be very, very low. Mm-hmm. So what that means is, what did I learn? And how many iterations can I continue to do when I go all in? The other piece of that is if you try to go all in too early, you fail. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine uses the analogy of sardine fishing versus salmon fishing versus bear hunting. Now, I'll explain why it's bear hunting. Maybe we'll change it to moose today. I like moose. We'll change it to moose today because it makes sense too. So sardine fishing, I got to go out every day because I'm catching these little bitty things, right? So I'm out there throwing my net every day, and it's a lot of work, and I got to put the effort in every single day to catch enough to feed my family, to keep my business open.
Mm-hmm.
It's the small fish, right? We're thinking in that same metaphor. But then as I'm doing this every day, I look up there and there's Fred on the river, at the mouth of the river, and he's got a rod and he's casting in and he's landing these king salmon. And these king salmon, they're like 50, 60 pounds. So he's catching one fish and he's feeding his family for 2 or 3 days with that one fish. That's salmon fishing. So I'm going to go up there to Fred and I'm going to say, hey, Fred, dude, show me how you do this. Help me out. I'd love to learn how to salmon fish because I'm working my butt off over here in the sardine category and not getting anywhere. So now I've become a salmon fisherman and I'm learned and I'm catching a salmon every day. And I'm actually doing pretty good because I'm catching at least one salmon a day. So now I've got some stockage. I'm actually growing and understanding. And now I'm ready to take the next step because the other day I ran into Sam. Sam was coming back into the town with a truckload of meat in the back of his pickup. It was weighed down because Sam had gone out moose hunting and had landed a moose. Now, you don't just want to go out, having hunted moose myself. And again, folks, pause now, go to YouTube and type in moose stomps person and watch what a moose will do to you, your dog, your snow machine, and anything else in its way if it gets pissed off. So if you're going out moose hunting, you better know how to handle the moose because it will kick your ass if you're not careful. So I'm assuming the moose hunting risk to get me 1,000 pounds of meat. Now, I get that moose and I'm taking care of my family for almost a year.
Yeah.
By getting that one, and another way of thinking about it is people call it landing the whale, right? You land that whale. So you got to start off and work your way up. Now, here's the other piece of that. I ain't going out and shooting a moose every day. Now, it may take me several days, even though I've been taught how to do this. It's going to take me several days to get that moose, to shoot that moose so that I can have that meat.
Yeah.
So what do I have to do? Well, I have to do some sustainment. I have to, in my business, I probably still need to hire somebody who's taking care of the sardines and taking care of that smaller fry client, if you will, in my niche. And then I probably, even me as now a moose hunter, I'm still going to be doing some salmon fishing, and maybe I got somebody else to do some salmon fishing for me and with me. But now I'm able to say, okay, y'all got the sardines, y'all got the salmon. I'm focusing on the moose, and I'm going after the moose. That's how you go and grow your business. If you try to jump, you're going to end up starving. And that's what's going to happen because you won't know what you're doing because you haven't set anything up in the smaller categories, and you're trying to go land that whale with your Zebco 33 rod and reel. Folks, look it up. I know it's a throwback, but look it up. What a Zebco 33 is. Is
that right there?
Landing a whale with that.
Is that right there with the Red Ryder BB gun? Like, how old are we talking?
Yeah. Zebco 33 has been a standard basic fishing reel for since I was probably 5.
The interesting thing there, I love that analogy and it works so well with business. But I think the really interesting thing is you got to dive all in. You have to take action. You have to move forward. But it's almost like, to mix up the analogy because it doesn't really work for diving all in, but it's like you got to dive in like incrementally. Like when you're sardine fishing, if you're just half-assing the sardine fishing, then you're never going to get good enough to get to the point where you want to make the jump to the salmon. If you dive all in on the salmon before you have any understanding of what that fish does, what kind of bait it wants, what kind of lures to use or anything, then you're going to fall apart there, right? You have to build up a base and then make that jump. And I think that's the best way to look at it in a business. And you talked about it with hiring. I think that's especially an easy way to paint this out is you set yourself up to a point where you have this baseline. And it's okay, hey, now I'm going to go for this. When you make that decision to go for it, you got to freaking go for it. You got to make that jump. If you just hold back, you're not going to go all in. So you're not going to learn all the problems. You're not going to solve those problems. You're not going to get to the point where you're actually able to go get the clients, right? Because you're going to be too busy half-assing it. You're not going to be all the way in. And so I think that's a really important thing to think about in terms of business, that you got to dive all in. You got to commit yourself to it, but you've got to do it incrementally. We had Amy Tucker on talking about salty britches. She did her 6 months, I think she said, where it was in a cooler and she had people open up on the cooler on the front porch and put their money in and take their salty britches out, right? If she dove all in right then, it probably wouldn't have worked. She did 6 months and then she dove all in on the next step. If we talked to her, we could call her up right now. I know she'd answer for us. If we called her right now and we said, hey, do you want to build a factory? There's an old steel plant in Pueblo that just shut down. They probably been closed for a while, but they pick a spot like that and they would say, hey, we could turn this factory, or we could make salty britches here. We got all these supplies. Do you want to do it right now? Probably not, because she's not at that production point where that jump makes sense. So it is a jump. It is a dive all in, but you have to make sure you're in a good spot for it. Because if you don't, we're talking businesses here. We're talking putting up your own capital. You're risking your life. You're risking your livelihood. You're risking your family's livelihoods in order to make those jumps. So you have to make sure it's a calculated risk. I think the next piece, as we kind of keep going through this ideation into taking action there, is after you've made the commitment, you're diving all in. I think the thing that, as we get towards the end of the episode, I want to talk about those first round of adjustments. I held my baby up. I lion kicked my baby. They all called it ugly. Now what the hell do I do? How do I put makeup on the baby? All right, that analogy might have ran out of legs, but what am I doing at that point where everybody said the baby's ugly? Yeah, lipstick on a pig, make it pretty. But no, what is that? How do you diagnose those problems and choose how to take action there?
Well, you got to learn your lessons. That's number one. And you got to be willing to listen to other people. Listen to your customers, get that customer feedback. And truthfully, smart business people that are successful, have outside folks looking at them and talking to them. Mm-hmm. Consultants, coaches, mentors, those sort of things. And when I say coaches, what I'm talking about, executive coaches, business coaches, those sort of people that give you an outside opinion of what's going on. Consultants to come in and do an assessment of your business and your processes. Mentors who are no more than 5 years ahead of you. It's kind of a good rule of thumb, by the way, but are in that same industry, and they're 5 years ahead of you, maybe 3 years ahead of you, maybe not too close, because you want to have some gap in those lessons so they can tell you who can tell you that, hey, this point right here, you're getting ready for that seed round. Well, then you need to do this. Or you're going to do a Series B. Well, this is something you ought to think about, because when I did a Series B, this, and this happened. Mm-hmm. Or you're getting ready to go public, and this, and this happened when I went public. That's the kind of talks you should be having, because when you learn those lessons from others, when you learn from others' mistakes, you're willing to say, I don't know it all. Somebody else take a look at this. How'd y'all do it? Because I don't have the answers. I can get us to this point. That's one method. And, here's the other method that's probably even harder for entrepreneurs to do, is to realize that you are the thing that's holding the whole business back. Mm-hmm. Your knowledge, your understanding, your ability to get the business beyond $10 million, to get it to 50 million, to get it to 100 million. You're the impediment to success. And that's tough. That's a tough one, because it's my baby. It's my idea. Look how, it wouldn't be here without you. You're right. Do you want it to continue to grow, and you want to continue to see it be successful? A lot of times you got to step aside. You got to hire that general manager. Mm-hmm. You got to hire a COO who's been there and grown a business, and be willing to be that person who says, oh, well, I'm going to be president. I'm not going to be president, CEO, founder. I'm going to be president and founder, and I'm going to hire a CEO who's taking a business from 10 million to 100 million, who's taking a business to that next leap, and admit that stuff. That's, and by the way, that's true leadership, is knowing when you are not the expert, and stop thinking that you are, just because you grew this up. So you have all this inherent knowledge and you're the only one that can do it. Well, then you've already said this is as far as your business is growing, because when you put yourself in that role, you are the limiting factor. When you're unwilling to take outside advice, whether it's an executive coach, a consultant, a mentor, or realize that, you know what, I'm beyond my means. I don't have the experience to do this, and I need to hire somebody to help me do this. Unless you're willing to raise your hand and see that, guess what? You're flatlining. You're flatlining, and what flatline equals in the business world is dropping off to bankruptcy. That's it. That's what happens.
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Tribe and Purpose. Are you tired of dealing with the costs of bad leadership? It's time to make a change. The Green Beret Leadership Program is your key to unlocking the full potential of your team. By developing leaders in your business, you'll get a proactive and responsible team that embraces challenges, takes calculated risks, and takes action without constant supervision. Developing great leaders can take a lot of time and energy. And that's why businesses tend to opt for the trial by fire or school of hard knocks path to leadership. The truth is that wastes time and money and puts a lot of extra stress on your leadership team. Poor leadership drives away quality talent, and the longer you wait to fix the problem, the more talent you're going to lose. With the Green Beret Leadership Program, you can use the battle-tested leadership principles of the Green Berets to develop great leaders in your team faster than with the school of hard knocks. You'll see changes in just a few short weeks. The longer you wait to take action, the more damage poor leadership can do to your business. Learn more about the impact GBLP can have on your business and schedule your free coaching call with your Green Beret coach, Otis, now at findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. That's findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. Don't leave your team to struggle on their own. Give them the tools they need to be great. You know, I think you said a phrase there, which to me is my fundamental tool for figuring out what to change in the business, what to figure out, and it's the limiting factor. I think that's generally a really good way. You know, the outside stuff, everything you listed is great, but I just want to add this to the list of limiting factors. That's your thought experiment. What is limiting us now? What are the problems that are preventing us from growing? What are the problems that are preventing us from fulfilling everything for our clients even better? All of those different things. When you find those limiting factors, the best thing about a limiting factor is they're usually something that you can change. You can find these things that you can actually change, things that are inside your control. I think there's a really interesting thing, though, and this is a little bit of my, to take your line, my foot stomper. You can't hear it because I'm on carpet. But, you know, when we start talking about giving up the reins as a leader, I think there's a really interesting thing there. One, if you think you're the expert, then you're already kind of screwed, because you shouldn't be thinking of yourself as the expert, because that shows that you're done growing, right? You want to keep growing. You should think of yourself as a student, not as the expert. But I think the other piece is this like ownership, that people get to this point where they want to hold on forever and ever. And it's just unrealistic. The idea that you're going to, you know, start up a business, build it all the way up, and then you're going to run that business for 40 years and you're going to ride off into the sunset. Well, even if you do get that, then what? Somebody else is still going to come in and take over the business. They're going to keep going, right? Unless you just sell it and say this business is done. So it's just a really unrealistic way of looking at it. And I think the best thing to do is just to think about, what is your contribution, right? What was your contribution there? And this actually made me think, usually I know I'm on the classic rock references, Dad. Sorry, this one is a rapper, so you're not going to know it. But this is from Benny the Butcher. And he has a line where just, what's more important, the flower or the soil that grows it? A lot of the time as the entrepreneur, you're the soil. You're not the flower. Like, you're really not. You get to build it up. Everything that business needs, you gave to it. But you don't get to be the flower. Somebody else gets to be the flower. And I think as an entrepreneur, especially in the startup world, you need to be comfortable with that. You need to be comfortable with the idea that you might put in all the work, and if it comes to fruition, if it becomes that beautiful flower, even if you're not actually the part of that, like, who's to tell you that it's not yours still? If I put that idea in somebody's head and they go create a business, was that business mine? Well, no, not legally, but I helped them. And I still contributed to that. And you should be happy with your contributions there. And that just takes a little bit of humility of recognizing what your skill set is and all those kind of things. But I just want to get that foot stomper in there because that is one thing that always has driven me crazy in the startup world, is this idea of, it's like somebody came in and took the business or these kind of things, and I lost it all. It's like, no, you built it for someone else. That's cooler, some would argue. I think that's a cooler thing to go pass it on to someone else who could do it even better than you can. Don't limit your business by being the only one in charge of it.
Well, and to wrap us up, because we've hit that stage of it. Two things. One, Jim Collins in the book Good to Great says the measure of the success of the leadership of a business is what it does after they leave. That's true leadership, because leaders don't lead followers. Leaders lead and train and create other leaders. And that's success. Because if you're unwilling to recognize that you've hit your limit as the leader, the organizer, the boss, the president, whatever title you're wearing, if you don't recognize your weaknesses, then you're arrogant and you're just telling people what to do, and you're not influencing, you're not leading, because great leaders create great leaders. And I love the way that Jim Collins talks about that in Good and Great. That's the true measurement of the success of a business. It's not how it's doing when you have this badass CEO that fixes things. It's how it's doing when he steps away and hires her in. And is she did he set her up for success to where she can take it to the next level? That's leadership, and that's success. And I'll tell you, we always tell our guests, it doesn't have to be profound when we talk about what you learn.
Yeah.
And lasers. Lasers do a lot. Lasers, they're going to fix space junk.
Yep.
They're my range finder when I'm hunting. Mm-hmm. They can also map out a whole inside of a building. They can tell how fast something's going. There's a whole list, and I can go on for another whole show. We can just talk about what can lasers do. So I'm thinking my answer used to always be 14. Mm-hmm. That was always my answer. I'm modernizing my standard answer to lasers. That's the answer.
I just gonna say, how about you? I got to mention, while we're talking lasers, I saw this thing the other day that was, those like wireless chargers, but it's like basically just puts the waves out everywhere. I saw one of those that is essentially a laser, where it's like a thing up there that senses the phone and it goes and sends it straight to it. And I don't know if that's technically a laser, but if it is, that really just goes into what you're saying there. Lasers are the answer to everything in the future, and that makes sense.
There we go. What'd you learn?
Yeah, what I learned was you can't pre-solve every problem. You and I joke mostly off air about this, but I like to ask unanswerable questions to our guests sometimes. And the reason that those things wind up being unanswerable is because you can't pre-solve it. It's something that you have to go through. It's a growing pain. How do you fix a growing pain? Well, you don't. You just grow and it stops hurting. That's kind of how a lot of these problems are. And I think when you start to flip that perspective, it really disarms the idea of a problem also. Because a problem, it can be the end of the world. The problem can be failure for the business. And so that's why you have to pre-solve everything and get rid of all that risk. No, accept that risk and be ready to adjust after that problem comes. So that was a big epiphany for me. I'll get into our time machine, which is going to be powered by lasers probably. And I'll go back and tell Camden what to do with Vir-Bee so that we can get all those things right instead of trying to pre-solve all those problems.
There you go. Yeah, and I'll tell you, folks, we appreciate you listening to our show. And if you're interested in building a team of leaders to make your business more successful so that you lead leaders, because leaders are self-starters, leaders solve problems. They bring solutions. They don't bring problems. They bring you solutions. Then go to findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. get on there and then sign up for a quick call with me. Take about 15 minutes to see if GBLP's a fit for you, or, I mean, tongue in cheek, you need more help than GBLP can give you. Well, we can point you in the right direction. There are other solutions out there, but if you want to create great leaders in your team, go to findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. Camden, I'm about to say run us out as you're taking a sip of coffee.
I'm ready. I'm energized.
Hey. All right. Run us out, Camden.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Cam and Otis Show. Remember, you can watch full episode of the show on our YouTube page at the Cam and Otis Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your life so they can enjoy it too. You can also follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archives of our episode is available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.